Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We're going to be talking about trends in education. And I'm looking around the room, and I think all of you know about the Show Me Institute. We are a nonpartisan research organization that focuses on public policy for Missouri from a free market perspective. So I'm not going to talk a lot about us. You can go to our website, and I would encourage you to do so because we have 3 recent publications that might be of interest to you on different topics. We have a primer on nuclear energy. As we begin discussing, the energy needs for the future and how we might address those. We also have David Stokes of our office, who's our Director of Municipal Policy, has issued part 3 of his, I call it, tome on municipal government, and it's on planning and zoning. It really does have impact upon what your local government's doing. I encourage you to take a look at that series. You might find some interesting topics for discussion, particularly as you're dealing with your local government. And the last publication we just released is on 3rd grade retention and about the success of states in requiring that they ensure that 3rd graders can actually read before promoting them. But those are all on our website. Let me move right along to our program and introduce very briefly our 2 panelists. Susan Pendergrass is the Director of Research for the Show Me Institute. Before joining the Institute, she was Vice President of Research and Evaluation for the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools, where she oversaw data collection and analysis and carried out a very rigorous research program. Prior to coming to the National Alliance, she was a senior policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Education during the Bush administration and a senior research scientist at the National Center for Education Statistics during the Obama administration. And I'm not going to go through her degrees, just know that she's got a PhD, she's very smart, and she knows math. So there you go. Our second speaker is Cory Koedel, who also knows math. He's the Director of Education Policy for the Show Me Institute. He is also a tenured professor of economics and public policy at the University of Missouri, Columbia. His research focuses broadly on the economics of education, and he spent more than 20 years studying ways to improve school performance. He currently sits on the editorial boards for 3 academic journals: Education Finance and Policy, Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis, and Research in Higher Education. Additionally, Dr. Koedel has contributed his expertise as a member of advisory boards and review panels for numerous school districts, state and federal agencies, and nonprofit organizations. And again, he's very, very smart, so I'm not going to go through his academic qualifications. You will feel the intelligence radiate from that as they speak. We are very blessed at the Show Me Institute to have 2 such experts handling our education policy program and the reforms that we are suggesting. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for being part of the Institute.
So I'm going to go first, and we're basically today just going to talk about sort of the state of education affairs in Missouri, where we sit right now, what opportunities are currently available for parents in Missouri, and what might be coming along, hopefully, in the legislative session. But I can say that right now, Missouri's in a I don't want to exaggerate and say crisis, but we're in a situation where 4 out of 10 Missouri students are essentially illiterate because they, on the statewide test, the MAP test, they did not get to the basic level. On the MAP test, you're either basic, proficient, or advanced. And 4 out of 10 are somewhere lurking below that bottom level. We don't know where. They know nothing, or they know something less than basic. And that number has been going up in a very troubling way. Statewide MAP scores for this past school year were recently released. There's been a little bit of progress. We are not yet back to pre-pandemic levels. And it's been essentially 5 years now. And it's time that all of that federal money should have been paying off. We should see this in some of the test scores. We're really not seeing it yet. So we're in a situation where, and also our scores on the national exam, the NAEP exam, are flat and slightly declining. So we have this problem. We have an accountability system that's pretty weak. It's called MSIP-6. And on the the positive side, we have recently reconfigured State Board of Education. We have a few new members. We have a relatively new commissioner. We have a relatively new governor. So there's a lot of opportunity for Missouri to really focus on these problems and improve our accountability systems and really put teeth into them so we can see where we have schools that are underperforming. But at the same time, we talk a lot about programs that might give parents options beyond their assigned public school. We believe that's a very important thing and for the state of Missouri. Compared to most other states, Missouri parents have very, very few options. We have charter schools right now on the two ends, St. Louis and Kansas City. Boone County could put us on the map for having the first charter school in a fully accredited district. So we have not yet had that in the state. We're one of the few states that has passed a charter school law 25 years ago that is largely as a form of punishment for low performance. We might break that mold if we get a charter school. So that's not a very widely available option. We do not have public school open enrollment. Our neighbors to the west, Kansas, have very strong public school open enrollment. You can pick any school in the state that you can either get transportation for or get your child to. Um, and every district must participate, and every district must post their open seats. And many, many states have this, but now Kansas has one of the strongest programs. And of course, our neighbors to the north, Iowa, they have private school, universal private school choice program, where any child in the state who wants it can get about $7,000 to pay for private school tuition. Oklahoma, our neighbors to the south, have a private school tax credit program where the tuition that you pay to a private school as a parent, you can take a dollar for dollar tax credit. Essentially, the state's picking up the tab. And Arkansas and Alabama, Arkansas has universal school choice, as does Alabama has a new, very strong program. So we're kind of surrounded by all these states that are letting parents pick where their kids go to school. And we are, by and large, not. We have a very small private school choice program you've probably heard of called MOScholars. And MOScholars is a program where if a person wants to donate to a scholarship organization, then that scholarship organization can give scholarship dollars to a qualifying student. They deposit it into a digital wallet for them, and the parents can spend it. It doesn't have to be at a private school. It could be for other things. But that program has been very small because the state has limited how much these scholarship organizations, there's 6 of them, can take in. It's 75 million, so they've increased it. But the program, because the scholarship organizations have to go out and basically fundraise, right? They have to go out and ask for donations and ask donors and corporate donors to donate to their scholarship program. It's really putting all of the onus on them. And for the reason that they often get donations in November and December, when people are starting to think about their tax bills, but kids need scholarship money in August, these scholarship organizations have been like pre-funding scholarships for kids and like paying the tuition until they get the donations in. So a couple of problems with the program. And this past year, the state legislature appropriated $50 million in public funding, partly to bridge that gap, but partly to make a public funding commitment to the program. There is a lawsuit that was filed by the Missouri NEA this summer, trying to prevent that from happening. They're saying essentially that the law says the program has to be funded through tax credit donations. The law says that the program is funded through tax credit donations. I'm not sure it says they can't be funded other ways, but that lawsuit is making its way through the courts. And in August, it has also been, there's 2 interveners, EdChoice and some families who have scholarship recipients and are intervening on the behalf of their siblings. The NEA asked the courts to basically put a temporary restraining order on the program while it goes through the courts, and they were denied that. So the program will continue to operate while the court case is heard. But we know that there are headwinds against school choice in the state. There are folks who really would like to prevent it from happening. This program serves low-income students and students with disabilities right now, although the eligibility is much broader than that. There's just no money. And they really want to prevent those children from attending private school with any public money whatsoever. There are 5 similar lawsuits in other states, and I do feel as though some teacher union leadership has a playbook that as these programs come up, they find the legal path to block them. And Wyoming has a similar lawsuit, and they did get a temporary restraining order. So we should be glad that we did not. But on a positive note for the MOScholars program, in the One Big Beautiful bill, there is a national tax credit now available. So in Missouri, you can give a donation to a scholarship granting organization and take it dollar for dollar off your Missouri tax bill. It's no problem. Now, when this program gets implemented, you'll be able to take up to $1,700 off your federal tax bill. You can't do it for the same dollars. Like, you have to pick your state tax credit or your federal tax credit, but you certainly could give 2 donations and take a state tax credit and a federal tax credit. And this has the opportunity to basically blow up school choice in the United States, because when the bill was moving through, there was one version that they said, okay, we'll put $10 billion in tax credits into this program, just like Missouri does the $75 million. And in the end, they decided not to limit it, but to make the total donation amounts relatively small, $1,700. So theoretically, every taxpayer in the country, if they wanted to not send their money to the IRS, you can imagine a website with a pull-down menu where you can select a scholarship organization in any state that you could give to. And there's just 2 stipulations. The state has to agree to receive the money. And so far, a handful of states have agreed. Missouri has not. And 3 states have said they will not receive the money. And I want to say they're like Oregon, and there's some pretty left-leaning states that they would not.
All right. There we go.
So it's putting some states that have not been very friendly towards school choice in a really tough dilemma, because if I live in Oregon, I can just donate to a scholarship to the Herzog Foundation in Missouri. I can so they're going to be sending basically tax dollars out of state. But Missouri's in a really great position on this because we already have the whole structure of the program. We already have 6 scholarship granting organizations who are already giving out scholarships. So provided that the leadership signals we are going to accept the money, then these organizations could go out of state and start asking for donations anywhere to their organizations. So like in Illinois, that will probably refuse them. You could certainly go to Illinois and ask for donations. So that's where that stands. Coming up in this legislative session, the Show Me Institute, we have a set of priorities. We have been working on this idea of public school open enrollment, and it has made it incrementally further in the last few years, but has not emerged as a priority for leadership. So no one's really put their political capital behind it yet. We are hopeful that that could happen this year. And we'll be also looking to expand charter schools beyond just Boone County to the rest of the state, and as well as our some other initiatives that Cory can tell you about. But I imagine you're probably interested in what's going on with charter schools in general and in Columbia. So I'm going to turn it over to Cory, and you can pick it up.
Okay, yeah, and I won't talk too long. That was a good coverage of most of the main issues, and then we can just open it up. Two quick things I'll say before I go into charter schools. I just want to also mention the other thing on the horizon that I view as very choice adjacent and just generally good policy is we do have some work to update the school funding formula in Missouri, and Mike is on the task force for the governor on this. But we have a very outdated school funding formula that is problematic in a lot of reasons, but probably the biggest reason for promoting school choice that it's a problem is right now our formula, you can't back out the amount each kid is being funded by. So modern formulas in other states have a student characteristic driven formula. It would be a base amount, and then there's different attributes of students that lead to different incremental increases. And for each kid, you can figure out exactly how many dollars the formula is allocating for their education. Missouri's formula, you can't do that. I think that's a really important part of making school choice a bigger thing in Missouri, is being able to stick dollars to kids. And so they're no longer going to buildings, but to educate children. And then a lot of different choice policies can be built off of that infrastructure. So that, Mike, I believe your task force report is due like a year from next December. So that's like a little ways off. What's that? Okay, Mike confidently says he'll fix it, so we'll all revisit that in a year and a half, Mike. I mean, it's a hard problem, and I won't get into all the weeds of it, but the politics of it are a mess. But So that's like, I think on a little bit longer horizon, it's just a really important thing to keep an eye on for lots of reasons. On the charter school thing, I'll just say, I think most folks in the room know that charter schools can now operate in Boone County without local school board sponsorship, which was that's the rule in most of the state. And the way I just, that's effectively a ban because the local school boards won't allow it. I don't have any like concrete numbers to give you or anything, but I have heard from folks who are in this space and working with sponsors that we will likely have charter schools opening in Columbia in fall 2026. So that's just what I've heard. That may not be right, but I do think folks are moving on it. And I know there's also a lot of funding support for this. There's some big donors who are willing to put some money behind this. So I'm optimistic about that. I don't know if it was kind of implicit in Susan's comments. There's something about, I really want to get the charter school on the ground and running. There are efforts in Jeff City to try and like kind of block it. And I think how are they want to do this? Oh, they want to require establishment of need before you can open a charter school. So the same way some like medical services will do this, you can't just open a hospital right next to another hospital. You have to establish that there's a need for it in that area. And if they were to do something like that with schools, then they could argue we never need a charter school because there's school coverage everywhere. So I think it's important to get some charter schools up and running, and I'm optimistic that'll happen soon. And we're also working in other places. I know I've been focusing on my attention a lot on Springfield, which is the biggest population center in the state without charter schools, and trying to gin up some interest in getting things moving with charter schools there. But really, statewide, charter schools, the evidence on them, on their efficacy is pretty amazing. Overall, on average, they're a little better than public schools, but some of them have really amazing outcomes. And Missouri charters, there's a national study done by some folks at Stanford that included about 30 states. And Missouri, we have some of the highest performing charter schools in the country. So expanding that sector of choice in Missouri would be a great benefit for kids. So I think I can stop there and we can open it up.
And I was remiss. I forgot in my introductory remarks to acknowledge that one of our founding members and board members, Mike Podgorski, is here. Thank you for joining us, Mike. And as you've already heard, he is working on the funding formula. So we're excited about how you all will not just tweak it, but redo it in substantive ways.
He's going to deliver for you.
Yeah, that's right. We're waiting for that. And despite the politics of it. Couple of things I did want to mention. The tuition credit goes into effect 2027.
The tuition tax credit at the tax credit at the national level is in negotiated rulemaking. So I would be reluctant to commit to anything there.
About when it'll be available.
Yes, that's right. I think there's a lot of finer points to work out with that, but it's not. I don't think it's 2026.
I think that I thought the governors needed to accept it by January 2027.
Yes, I think that's right.
That's in the statute. That's in the statute. And then just one question for you, Cory, before we begin. As we're looking at the charter school performance just generally, and Columbian specifically, when you talk about they're performing better, how much better are they really doing?
So the Stanford study indicated that on average, and I might not get the numbers exactly right. I believe it was if the kid attending a charter school versus a traditional public school on average across the country, it was the equivalent of 6 extra days of instruction in reading and 16 days in math, or maybe I have math and reading mixed up, but something like that. So that's a non-trivial amount of learning, although it's not going to shake anything. And I don't know the exact numbers for Missouri, but I do know they were significantly higher on average because the Missouri charters were in like the top 5 states of the 30 or so states they looked at. And I also want to clarify, part of the way they figure this out, the effects of the charter schools, is they go and they get these big data sets from the states, and they go find an observationally similar kid who had similar prior test scores and demographics and poverty and everything, who attended the school this charter kid would have attended. And they compare them to see the charter school effect. Well, so the charter school is going to look better the worse the public school is. So frankly, kind of the bad news side of it is one reason I think the Missouri charters are looking so good is the alternatives are quite poor.
Okay. All right. Well, let's open it up for questions.
Can you contain yourself on that one?
I mean, I've been saying this so much, but I think it's a lack of leadership. And I think in some of the states where you see these big programs like the Mississippi Reading Miracle, and you see the Arkansas, when Governor Sanders took office, she put together something called the LEARNS Act, and it was like choice and higher pay for teachers and early, like she put all these things into a comprehensive package in a very offensive leadership way. And the way it has tended to work in Missouri is, well, our former governor said, if it comes to my desk, I'll sign it, sort of a very passive thing. And then we have bills that track through the session, and the Missouri legislature hasn't been able to get along very well. So they get to the end of the session and everyone's kind of mad at each other. So they throw a bunch of stuff into an omnibus bill, and you get, there is, and Cory knows this better than I do, but there is a way of teaching reading to young kids that has been proven to be not only not effective, but like harmful. It's called 3Qing. It is like harmful, and it should be replaced like by phonics. We had a couple bills that were like going to ban 3Qing because it's harmful to kids, and they couldn't even get that. They couldn't even agree to that. So by the end, they threw something into this omnibus bill that said, we don't support 3Qing or something,
Well,
right?
it
Like,
couldn't be the primary
like
method.
a watered down version. It's like what I believe we need is like when a lot of the big reforms happen in Florida, and they are like one of the leaders in education, Governor Bush said, I'm going to be an education governor, and this is going to be my most important thing. And he put letter grades on schools and districts. He started some of the first private school choice programs. He said if a child goes to an F school for a year or a D school for 2 years, they automatically get a transfer out. And he really took that on. Lamar Alexander, similar in Tennessee. And we just haven't seen, and I would say Sarah Sanders and Kim Reynolds in Iowa. She's like, I'm getting universal school choice. Greg Abbott in Texas. Texas just passed a big, he like primary. I mean, like, they're like, this isn't a priority for Texas families. And he didn't really let off the gas until it happened. And, I am assuming you don't see that. I don't see that at the top of Missouri. And I think we need a strong commissioner. I think that right now we're very much in kind of a compliance mode. We have a weak accountability system. We have accountability system where every district passes. Every district's fully accredited. So there's really St. Louis Public Schools is fully accredited, and I can't even begin to tell you what a disaster it is right now. They're projected to have $0 in the bank in 2030. They're fully accredited. So we have no accountability system, and we need a state board and a governor and state commissioner of education to say this is the end. We're not going to accept, we're not going to accept this anymore. We're going to have a strong accountability system. We're going to let parents choose, especially we know the bottom 5% of schools in the state, they don't even let those parents choose. We know the unsafe schools in the state. By federal law, if you attend an unsafe school, and I would say one of the most unsafe schools in the state that I've looked at is Battlefield.
Battle High School.
Battle High School. Got to
Yeah,
be one of the most
Battlefield.
unsafe schools in the state. I mean, they have weapons violations, they have arrests, they have so many in-school suspensions, so many. But the thing that would make them actually qualify as a federally unsafe school is out-of-school suspensions. They mysteriously have none of those. But they have weapons violations, and they have arrests, and they have physical altercations. The kids who attend there, by federal law, have a right to switch schools, but Missouri's not even. None of our high schools have expelled students now since that law went into effect. So I feel like that's what's happening. Is I just don't feel the urgency, the sense of leadership, that this is a big problem. And, we've tended to water stuff down more than make it, raise the bar. So I'm sorry that to be so depressing, but do you have a better take on that?
No, I mean it's just a apathy. It's
Mm-hmm.
I was comparing it to like the nation at risk stuff from I guess 40 or 50 years ago now. People used to get really worried when the schools weren't performing well and the kids couldn't learn anything, but the same thing's happening now, but no one seems to care.
Do you know A Nation at Risk? It was a federal study in 1982, and it was a very short report when it came out, but they said if a foreign nation imposed upon the United States the public education system that we've created for ourselves, we would consider it an act of war. And people took that really seriously. They're like, this is how bad it is. And but then their fix for it was course taking. And classes on lasers. I mean, it's like in hindsight, but they were like, this is how bad it is. And that started this standards movement and testing and accountability and No Child Left Behind. Then there was just big pushback on that. And certainly there's no appetite in Missouri to like put a letter grade on a school. And since the No Child Left Behind and the standardized testing stuff has really kind of faded out, we've declined. Yeah, we do a podcast at the Show Me Institute, and I just had a person on podcast to discuss the disturbing trend of what's called equitable grading. And they did a big survey of teachers and found that half of teachers, or basically half of all districts, are using some form of equitable grading. And that is no grades on homework, unlimited number of times to retake a test until you pass it. If you don't turn something in, you get 50 points instead of 0. And you can't get penalized for turning something in late. So these are 4 things which teachers don't like.
I mean,
And
that's the really important part. The
teachers don't
interesting
like
thing
it.
about that study, the teachers don't like it. So like, where is this stuff coming from? You really start to wonder, because I haven't met anyone who's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
But somehow it's like everywhere. It's very perplexing.
I think we're in the outcome of the No Child Left Behind Act going away.
Yeah.
It went away.
The
So
No Child Left Behind Act was enforcing rigor and making states and school districts confront poor performance. But in 2013, they effectively they repealed it. They replaced it with a different act that essentially took all the teeth out of it. And actually, that's when the NAEP scores started declining. I mean, there's other things that happened. All the kids got cell phones, and so you got to be a little careful how we interpret that. But
there's a lot of change going on. I mean, this idea of this, some of the equitable grading policies that teachers don't even like, the result is like kids aren't turning homework in, right? Or they're turning it in late, or they're just like sort of taking the test the first time to see what it's like, because they can take it again. And so that is affecting the environment. That's why I think teachers don't like it, right? But I don't know how much that's being taken into account. And just said like that if we could all just raise our expectations, right, and bring rigor back, but that is certainly easier said than done.
Well, we've seen other states. Maybe you can talk about reading. I mean, and what we've seen in some of the states where they're saying kids have to learn to read by 3rd grade. And it's not like we're going to implement these literacy programs. It's like you have to learn to read.
yeah, and that's more of like there's like process-based interventions where you might say, okay, now we have to teach everyone. Everyone has to take this professional development and do this step and that step and that step. And then there's outcome-based regulation where we say, look, you got to read by 3rd grade, go figure out how to do it, but you got to do it. And so the states that have implemented the strongest policy in this regard, the kids are they take the regular standardized test, but they also take a literacy test at the end of 3rd grade. It's a separate test. And if that test says they can't read, they have to be in 3rd grade again. And the idea is not to be mean to the kids. It's because if you can't read by the end of the 3rd grade and you go into 4th grade, you can't understand anything that's happening anymore. And there's really good evidence that the kids who get retained when that happens, it's to their great benefit. But I will say, it's also interesting that politically it's hard to maintain that standard. People get weak and we feel sad about it and we don't want to do it. So I don't want to oversimplify it because there are differences, but my understanding of the research on this is that is a 2nd order issue, that the learning styles thing is not the 1st order problem. I think it's standards, but whatever it is, that's not the 1st order issue.
However, I would say too, in states that have like Arizona comes to mind, they have a very broad open school choice environment, which means that even within your own family, if you have one child who learns this way and one child who learns this way, this child can go to this charter school and this child go to this charter school, or you could homeschool using the scholarship. They have a very universal scholarship program. And so in places where charter schools are very yeah, a lot easier to open, certainly than in Missouri, where they can open anywhere. You just have to get a sponsor and have a good application. A lot of charter schools specialize in maybe students who are grade levels behind, or students who are in the juvenile justice system, or students who are, pregnant or have a child. Like what we have seen is in the charter school space, there's like 7,000 or 8,000 charter schools, a lot of specialization, and that can happen when you allow schools to open outside the purview of the school board, but under a charter. Then you have the opportunity to have smart people open these schools that serve certain communities of children, and parents love them. There's also like outdoor schools and language immersion, and there's classical, and there's so many types of charter schools that Missouri parents don't have access to. Like, you don't get to pick that here, even though in some states you have a wide array of, you have a Montessori and a Waldorf, and you have an Audubon, and Missouri, like, you look at your utility bill, that's where your kid's going to school. And that is, you know, in some cases, it's not test scores that parents are looking for. They're looking for the
Sure.
environment that matches their child better. And again, I have 3 kids. They're not all the same, so I can't move every time somebody needs a new school, right? But in states where everybody has 3 or 4 or 5 choices for each of their children, then that is uh, a place where schools can specialize, and certainly other countries do this. And we are sort of behind the 8 ball on that one. And if you believe in the learning styles, and you can find a school that believes in learning style, you know what I mean? It's like, that is a thing. And it's unfortunate that Columbia Public Schools is not going to open a school tailored to a certain group. They're just going to open a school.
But let me ask a question, because our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education can set what the standards are for teacher certification, can't they?
And especially the school with the state school board.
And the state school board. So one question is, okay, so the Department of Education can do all that. Why don't they say something like, to be an elementary teacher, you need to be able to teach phonics?
Well, going to Mike's point, I mean, there's no reason to have a voluntary second program to teach that when you have a certification process that the state approves. If the state thinks that that's important, they can just require the certification programs to teach it. But like a lot of things, going back to the comment that started this conversation, there's just a lot of apathy to do anything. But the state actually has, in theory, a lot of power over this kind of thing.
I'm going to just add, because they've heard this is my mantra. As a state, we do a very poor job of measuring outcomes. We measure output. So even like the literacy program, you'll hear the statistics of the number of teachers who've gone through the program. What you don't hear is, are they taking it back to the classroom, and how are their students performing after they've gone through the training? Are the kids learning?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we want to thank you all for a very vigorous discussion, and we're going to be here for a little bit longer, so feel free to corner us if you want to discuss some items more. Thank you again for coming, and be sure to visit our website, showmeinstitute.org, or MOSchool rankings if you want to dig deeper on the schools and school districts in our state. Thank you for coming.